Hey, um, and our story continues. Welcome. We're making our way through a doctorate program. If you're still with me, I mean, God bless your soul. You're sitting through some hours of content here. I hope it's insightful, maybe even entertaining, interesting. I don't know. It's certainly helpful for me and helping me work through certain concepts. So I'm enjoying this, and so I'll keep going. Um, you certainly don't have to watch. Anyway, um, but thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And so, where were we? Waterfall moment, right? I love these like little pauses. You have me like after that wild Purim day, like by the bonfire with the Chabad guy, or you have me like I don't know, in all these different scenarios where you can just freeze frame life and go like, whoa, that was a hell of a moment. And so you have me in Nashville or outside of Nashville, uh, and just like staring at this sun by this waterfall. Um, God, yeah, there's some really special moments in my life and that's certainly one of them, of like these alignment moments where I just feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. And there's an argument to be made. We're always exactly where we need to be, and interesting. It could be helpful. I am where I need to be. I've certainly written a poem like that. And so we shall continue. My relationship ended, and I was left with a big gaping hole in my heart. People don't always have compassion for the breakers. When it can be very hard and painful for the breakers too. They're also mourning something as well, and the feelings of guilt can be involved there. Um, this certainly helped. This breakup helped me set the stage for many of my future breakups. I had to watch so much content helping me just like be okay saying scary things, and like how honesty is helpful and good and can help all parties when you can speak how you feel, as difficult as the feel is to share or relationship is to end. Um, and this certainly helped me in the future when ending relationships with other friends, ending relationships, or at least putting a pause on relationships with family, or ending the relationships like they were, ending relationships even with my therapist, the conversion, like, gender exploratory therapist. Um, yeah, so in a way, like, it's interesting. I'm like, why did I need to spend 3 hours talking about that whole process of learning how to do that? But I also, why did I need it? Why did I need to spend a year or 10 months, building to that? But I do think it set the foundations to this day, of just learning to gauge things and when things feel right for me and when they don't, and how to acknowledge, especially things that feel like maybes, how to work through that and to find a decision, people, as it is, that feels the most interconnected with my being. In all this, I still had to be a therapist. Um, I maybe had a couple clients. It wasn't big. I mentioned there was some tumultuous stuff in the program going on. I mostly, there's an argument to be made that I was surfing above it, that I wasn't letting it get me down. And there's an argument to be made I was just the ostrich with the head in the sand, like just grateful that it wasn't going to impact me that hard. Um, Either way, I didn't, or just trying to, naively believe that it wouldn't. I'm still uncertain. All I know is that there were people who were very anxious about the state of the program at that time, rightfully so. I wasn't, at least actively, one of them. And that certainly could have also been a factor of just my privilege, and that while this was my passion, my life was going to be, I wasn't going into debt to be in the school. And that is in the room. As much as I can scream that it's, I certainly didn't want to get kicked out of the program or lose the program, but it just puts. I'm there for passion, like because I'm excited and want to be there, but it's I don't. It's a different position, certainly. Yeah. Whoa. And even generally, and this is actually the way Syrian Jewish people interact with systems, and you can potentially say Jewish people in general, but I'll certainly speak for the Syrian Jewish community, is one of like this active distrust of system, in that, no one else is going to protect us except for us, and that we need to look out for ourselves. We'll use the system as best we can and play the systems, but ultimately these systems are going to hurt us and have historically hurt us, and so our best bet is to game them and or just, ride them out and not trust them for anything. And, this was certainly reverberated in the words of my cohort member, who was all about just survive and get the degree. You're not here to learn. You're here to just check the boxes and get out of here and be able to open your own practice one day. And you'll be able to finally do that. You want to actually learn how to do therapy, you do that on the outside or whatever, or through your experience, with clients face to face. And yeah, it's an interesting mentality. It's certainly a mentality that's functional, but it could be one that separates you from systems and from ever fully trusting systems that can be helpful. It's certainly been advantageous in terms of the Syrian Jewish community to some extent, and of their ability to find success and to unify and to make sure they build systems that protect each other. So those parts are interesting and have helped them sustain, if you're thinking about their sustainability and their great successes, at least monetarily, financially. Those, of course, don't happen, though, outside of sources of privilege, and those are very nuanced conversations of like what defines success, what is success, and how the Syrian community found quote-unquote success. And yeah, it's certainly a discussion I'd be open having. I'm hoping to dedicate a whole episode to concepts of privilege, so maybe I'll put it in there. Whoa, I didn't think this episode was going to go there that fast. That's interesting. But yeah, navigating systems in a world that historically has, abused Jewish people. And I'm certainly not, this isn't about anti-Semitism in the sense where I think my program is anti-Semitic. Kind of half of my cohort was Jewish, at least, if not more. But more so, and that does not mean that there isn't, hate is complex. You can have a room full of Jewish people and have a room full of anti-Semitism. It doesn't, your identity does not exclude you from hating of said identity, i.e. trans people who can be transphobic. And so you certainly may have heard me on this channel use my Jewish identity as perhaps a way to defend myself from accusations of anti-Semitism. And it's interesting. Wow, that is a unique conversation in itself too, as to what defines what is. Well, I think it's important also to just understand how people use terminologies and if they're using them in good faith. When we're describing critiques of Zionism and we're just calling those anti-Semitic, that is, I would say, not in good faith. Because you're using a terminology that's meant to protect, understand, analyze, and you're using it to defend harm towards others. It's in itself supposed to prevent harm, hypothetically, and just understanding it and getting to terms with it. That's why we name it. Naming things helps us understand them. And so, it's certainly in my video, the problems with Judaism, I'm critiquing a religion. It does not necessarily mean I'm being anti-Semitic. Where it would bleed into anti-Semitism is if I started, I think, to think about conspiracy, or to talk about, Jews being money hungry, or uh, um, and that's true. I mean, how many times have I accused the Syrian community of being materialistic in different language? Is that anti-Semitic? I don't think so. I. It's really hard to understand, I guess, what I'm talking about would be internalized anti-Semitism, internalized Jewphobia. I think it shows up. I think it's certainly, and I could point to one that, if you might, for my Syrian guests, certainly they'll understand. But I think to some extent we have internalized Jewphobia, internalized anti-Semitism. It would be how we reacted to the ultra-Orthodox. Obviously, there are ultra-Orthodox Syrian people. I'm not counting. No, see, even that's a whole. Oh well, I'm talking about the world that I grew up in. See, I was about to call it the mainstream too. Even all this language that I'm actually using right now can be the caked in anti-Semitism. So this othering, oh, but see, you now might be getting defensive. See, quick question, like if you are not an ultra-Orthodox person and you are Jewish, so if you are Jewish, non-ultra-Orthodox, how do you feel about ultra-Orthodox people when you see them on the street with their hat and their beard and the whole garb? How do you feel? I remember friends using words like they're smelly and gross, and they eat gross food, and that they have funny accents, and aren't they hot? And I probably felt some of this as I was becoming ultra-Orthodox around my family, some of that internalized Jewphobia. Now, you can argue that they were really just fighting against me, trying to fight against their culture, and it was a culture clash. Sure, I'm not going to be so quick to call how they reacted towards my ultra-Orthodoxy internalized. See, I much more prefer the word internalized Jewphobia. I think it's a much funner word. It flows more off the tongue, but we can call it internalized anti-Semitism. Oh, but to see the whole word has been like co-opted, and so I don't even feel comfortable using it, but we can talk about it. Yeah, I'm gonna just call it internalized Jewphobia. Sue me. So, well, and so internalized Jewphobia and Jewphobia in general, is real. And yeah, so that's, I think, calling any population smelly, calling their foods weird and smelly, making fun of their garb, their ways of life, their accents, their language, their religious belief systems. That to me sounds like a phobia. Insert thing here that you're making fun of. I know, Islamophobia, it has many of the same tropes, as in like, we'll make fun of their garb and their practice and their sounds and their smells. Phobia of people from India, I remember certainly a lot of that being expressed. God forbid someone should get the bad luck of getting an Indian roommate in college, were some of the things that were spoken about. Or Asian roommates in general, like cooking their weird, smelly foods. And right, and so that's straight up. Those are like some of the definitions and understandings of hate crimes. How else? See, and then how does this differ from like? No, I just disagree with their politics. I don't like the ultra-Orthodox because I think they're racist and homophobic. It's tricky because, well, that's what right. And so why is my critique not as bad as saying they're smelly and they look weird? Because one is based in defending human rights and the other is abusing human rights of them. Their smell, it's first off, all of that is subjective. But their appearance, all of that isn't harming you. It unless you're from that community and you'll argue that the use of their garb is a way to control, another conversation. But objectively, what they're doing is not directly, at least in their garb and their clothes and their language, is not trying to directly harm you. And I realize, again, the language can be used. All these are control mechanisms. That's for their own community to explore. If you're not talking about that, if you and when you say they smell, you're not talking about, no, you're not. Or if you say their garb is weird, you're not talking about, clothing control in a nuanced way. Do you see how? And so certainly being anti-Semitic, or as I'm calling it, just Jew-phobic, is a thing. And so we've internalized as society, anything that society hates, you are likely to have internalized if you lived in said society, even if you are the thing. I think we call, oh God, in Marxism the term is like, or in like social communism, socialism, whatever, there's a term, it's false consciousness. Is where you but in psychology it's just internalized phobia. With psychosis, it can impact the way that their symptomology shows up. If people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia have bad thoughts about people who have schizophrenia, as most of society does, if you've seen any headline article that says psychotic killer, most people think people with schizophrenia are violent, when the statistics don't show that. The evidence does not support that. It's just scary movies and big hype and really discrimination against people with mental health conditions. And so, if anything, schizophrenia is usually symptomology of trauma, of understanding trauma. And so you're in that way discriminating against people with trauma histories. It's right. But if you're a person who's diagnosed with schizophrenia and you're taught all these things, then suddenly you believe that you're violent and bad, because you are the illness. And the way we speak about the illness, we say you're schizophrenic. We say you have you have a disease, or you are diseased. It's like this all-encompassing, and so suddenly you are the thing. Yeah, internalized phobia is very real and very painful. God. And I speak about internalized transphobia a lot in this channel, just like trans people are, all these beliefs that I grew up with, that trans people are gross, they're liars, they're perverts, they're just doing fetish, they're escapists, they'll never be taken seriously, they're not real. Trans women are not real women. Trans men are just getting high off of testosterone. They're ruining their bodies. They're following social trends. I mean, and so when you have that kind of language, like, it goes into the brain, and it can be very hard to unwrite that code. And so even though you are now the thing, it doesn't change the fact that you have this code inside of you that says the thing is bad. And what will actually start to happen is you'll start to think you are bad. And there's a great cartoon of the dog in the mirror saying, "Bad dog." And it's super painful and can lead to some of the worst mental health symptomologies, because you're literally stuck with yourself all the time. And so you're stuck with this thing that you hate, and the thing that you hate is you, God. And so because there is such a thing as anti-Semitism, and it is in the air, and it does exist, it's likely that I have internalized anti-Semitism as if almost anyone in the United States of America, we could start to argue anyone in the world. It's very likely that they have internalized anti-Semitism or Jew-phobia, as they've internalized tons of other phobias. And especially, and even if they are Jewish. And so, yeah, the first step is talking about it, acknowledging that it exists, and facing it in the different ways it can show up. And see, it's so much, it's so much easier to name my internalized transphobia because it's just so much more palpable. I don't know about my internalized Jewphobia. Like, I'm sure it exists. It's certainly still there. even being in that world, in the ultra orthodox world, I still had some of the that visceral like, I don't want to be here. This place is gross kind of reaction. I still had trouble eating gefilte fish. Maybe that's just because gefilte fish is gross. Sephardic Jews didn't grow up eating gefilte fish. Thinking gefilte fish is Jewish food is kind of racist. Or like ethnicist. You're like putting Jews into this matzo ball gefilte fish herring thing when that's not what all Jewish people eat. Anyway, how am I internalize my Jew phobia? It would be if I like thought the Jews are conspiring to control the world. I don't think that. I'm trying to think beyond the smelly thing. What else do we are we money hungry? We're stealing. Give me more. It's hard. It's hard to look in the mirror and like find these things, but they exist. It could even be down to I just looked in the mirror and see I had a nose. Like, if people who are uncomfortable with their Jewish, which is so funny because there's no Jewish nose, but it's just a stereotype. But like uncomfortable with the way their noses look, that can also just be in general. A phobia of being, not this like white American, perfect looking, symmetrical person. I like my nose. My nose. No, I don't hate my nose, but who knows? Who knows how I really feel about it, and how if I had a more perfect nose, would I love myself more? God. Internalized Jewphobia. Huh. I don't know. But it's a thing. So we'll acknowledge it. Oh. So I took a slight research break and I found out that I am not the first person to stumble upon this. It's so interesting because of the way it intersects. This should be a whole video. I just have a whole video called The Self-Hating Jew and understanding Jewphobia and its many different conceptualizations. There's so many layers. Judaism is so unique. Thinking it's special, but it is so unique because it is religion, it is ethnicity, it is multi-ethnic. It's gone. I'm getting back into my Jewish video. Well, this is a good preface because I'm about to become a lot more religious in Judaism. So maybe I'm like, just prefacing talking about that. It could be. But in the story, not in my life right now, in the story. So some of the things I was reading were like how it shows up, because I'm like, why am I not seeing it? Why am I not feeling it? So one of the ways they talked about it, and by the way, again, people throw around the term self-hating Jew, that gets weaponized too. So I'm going to be very careful with the language I use. My heart hurts from it because I imagine people have thrown that term as me, specifically when I supported Palestine and the Free Palestinian Liberation Movement, and so and so how do we tell the difference between what is genuine critique and what is internalized self-hatred? And so it was this quick Google search, and it started talking about how you both have this feeling of the assimilating Jew who may feel they are better than those that don't assimilate. They may feel superior because they feel like they're distancing themselves from this, backwards lifestyle. You have these people, this is so interesting, the people who don't want to dress very outwardly Jewish. Now that can just be, so like wearing a yarmulke in public was not something we did as kids growing up. We didn't really, it was in school, it was on Friday night dinner in the beginning, and it was in shul. We didn't walk around with kippahs. And on one hand, it's just this, that was a protective mechanism, safety. On the other, it was also, yeah, there's, so it's really hard to talk about. And of course, there's the Jews in the religious world that look outside and say, like, you guys are not even Jewish, you're bad Jews. And so it's really hard to understand, like, the different layers. Right. And if you were ever in a religious world or interacted with the religious Jewish world in any kind of way, especially the ultra-Orthodox world, there's certainly very strict lines of who is Jew and who is not. So, like, transphobia is, of all things, it's more straightforward. Because I mean, it's obviously complex in its own ways too, and can be really challenging to break. But this is different. It feels different because it's both racial, ethnic, and religious, all at the same time, and it goes in all sorts of different directions. But even, like, not wanting, like, this desire to assimilate could come from a place of, like, not wanting to affiliate with your culture and feeling like there's something wrong with it, something wrong with being different or unique. And so how do we, in the kindest way that both honors the culture and also can acknowledge problems within it? Some people have distaste to going to a kosher restaurant because of that atmosphere. Again, right? What? And this, like, idea that there's something less luxurious about just being around Jewish people or in a Jewish setting. And maybe there is some objective things you can, like, name, but, like, and maybe today it's changed because kosher restaurants, especially if you live in the New York City area, have, become very nice and delicious. And this idea that if it's kosher, it's going to be gross. So is that it? It's really hard to parse out what is genuine critique and what is phobia. And I don't think that this conversation is one that is without nuance in so many different layers and levels. Even the idea of that Jews are exceptional could be born out of and I certainly spoke about it, out of like a trauma. This trauma that, at the outside world thinks they're, disgusting, and so they have developed this own self-belief in order to combat that no, what are you talking about? We're the chosen people. And all of that can be related to, anti-Semitism. But none of that is outside of the context of the religion itself, from its origin story being one that is supposed to be, is trying to be different than the mainstream and separate, and its entire legal structure, at least on the Orthodox side, is set up in order to do that, in order to maintain its separate uniqueness, chosen people, society. So it's really, yeah. So there's so much there. And so, like, how do I be both proud of my Jewish heritage while not being complacent to the harms it has done, while also not hating it and understanding it with nuance, love, and care. And this is where I give myself permission to be more outspoken as a critic of it, in my critique of it, while acknowledging that it's actively harming people. I feel it is. The religion, I've spoken out against the religion, and even to some extent, the culture. There's it's a more complex conversation. You say, see, there it is. You're why are you spending so much time critiquing this? Why don't you go and critique Muslim culture, and I'm just like, I don't know Muslim culture. How can I critique it if I don't know it? Well, then you should go my audience isn't Muslim. I mean, maybe, hello, Muslim audience, if you are out there, Assalamu alaikum. But it is, and as I shouldn't assume all Muslim people speak Arabic, but I don't know. Hearts, thanks for supporting me. But whatever language you speak, I imagine most people are watching my videos in English, so peace be unto you. But yeah, it is, why don't I critique other communities? Because this is the one I know. As now I'm critiquing my doctorate program. Why don't I critique other doctorate programs? Because this is the one I lived. This is the one I got. And so this is my source material. I certainly could probably go read about, and I'm not one who's like, oh, see, I've even said it. The LIU Post is not the worst doctorate program. Like, there's certainly other horrific ones. It's not happening in a vacuum. You know, the colleges in general are all having to make difficult financial decisions and having these back and forths of if they can maintain their sustainability, and perhaps sacrificing quality over quantity and access to finance. And the entire system is, you know, one that doesn't provide access to or that can be limited in access and to be exclusive for certain types of people. And yeah, and it's not without critique of the APA, the American Psychological Association in general, and a critique on the entire way we train our healers, and not just this program, but the entire diagnostics and statistics manual and the DSM. And I mean, I've compared LIU to Flatbush in many ways. I think our education systems in general are broken, so I'm certainly not, oh, but you see, you're still critiquing Flatbush. Why not critique all high school? I do, and I would. If I understood other high schools, I can critique high school as far as I understand high school. I only know what I can have read about or assume, I guess, about public high school. The American public school system, I didn't live it. I don't know it. And so I'm sitting here, and I've lived many flavors of Judaism. I have lived this particular psychology program. I have lived this Syrian lifestyle. I have lived in the jet set world, and so and I lived in the ultra-Orthodox world, and I went through Chabad system and the Litvak Kiruv Olami situation, and yeah, so that's what I can discuss. You know, even in critique of my own familial dynamics, do I think that my family was the worst one? Of course not. What? What? I've been very vocal about how, I mean, in my original PowerPoint, it's many. This is an epidemic in family systems, the things I'm talking about. The reason why I'm talking about them publicly is because I think they're relevant to other people in other situations. My mom was not the worst mother in the world. She was horrifically abusive. There are other abusers, but she was the abuser I knew. Am I my mom phobic? Am I hating on her because she was my mom? No, I'm critiquing because it was the mother I knew. It's one I had. It's my model of critique that I can critique, and because I think it's relevant to other people. Either had similar, worse, better, can relate into that universal human experience. And so when I use specific examples from my life history, I'm not here to be this self-hating. I'm a self-hating Franco. I think the Franco family, in the way they set up their structures from my grandfather down, is problematic. Do I think he's the most problematic person in the world? No. But he's problematic, and so I'll talk about it. Maybe I haven't talked about it enough, since some of my own fears still living here. Oh man, there's so much there. But how to navigate these spaces while naming harm that is actively being done, while honoring the fact that these are still human beings in context, and not wanting to sound like I'm picking on these people, only that I'm critiquing what I can't talk about the sandwich I'm not eating. Or if I were, I'd have to read about that sandwich, or I've had to eat it already, or meet someone who ate the sandwich. And they could tell me about the sandwich. And then I could go, oh, wow, that sandwich sounds really similar to mine. Does this thing resonate? Yes. Oh, wow, well, holy shit, maybe I can talk about your sandwich too. Great. And so you'll see me talk. I have talked to people who've like escaped different, other different controlling religious systems. So sometimes I'll mention and reference those. I have had some education about different cultures, and so I can reference those. I can certainly speak about my own trans experience, and yeah, I don't think you have had to be in a culture to speak about the culture, but if you were in the culture, that I don't think that is wrong of you. If anything, it's your well of information is coming from that space, and so I'm not some self-hating Jew. I am a person who is looking inside and trying to work with what they understand, and work with what what I can parse out and help me really process what the hell happened to me. I said that in my initial video. The first try of processing what the hell happened. I'm still doing it. I'm doing it right now in these videos. What the hell happened? And all of this, I think, connects back to any phobia. And this is where when I talk about being in using these terminologies like anti-Semitism, using it in good faith, any phobia, the reasons why the phobias are so problematic is because they're not based in, not just that they're not based in reality, but they take us away from understanding our universal connectedness. So if you're picking on someone for being Jewish, then what you're doing is missing the fact that everyone's human. And you're dehumanizing them based on this arbitrary idea. Same if you're discriminated against a skin color, same if you're discriminated against someone for their gender, same if you're discriminating against someone for their sexuality. Discrimination is this idea that I'm going to treat you as not deserving of the same respect that I do normal humans because of some arbitrary thing. And so the opposite of that for me would be to just not see the arbitrary, not just not see them, sorry, but to acknowledge that these things are arbitrary. This deep acknowledgement of the arbitrary nature of the thing, and how the hatred of it makes no logical sense. And so we can, once you take away, it's a delusion, if anything. And so once you take away the delusion of it, then what you're left with is the thing. We can finally start to talk about it. And certainly we have our own unique experiences. I don't want to erase the uniqueness of human experience and the beautiful ways people can show up in culture and their cultural tapestries that they bring forward in honor of this like homogeneous, we're all the same kind of thing. But I just don't want to miss the story and have people get mistaken that we are not the same, because we are. Right. We're different, we're unique. Especially, I'm not here to erase trauma histories. I'm not here to not acknowledge, I'm here to be colorblind and say like, oh, I don't see color. No. I have still many internalized, I'm probably, I'm racist in ways I don't fully understand. In any interaction where I'm interacting with people from a different cultural background or different, even, or interacting with people of different sexual orientation, gender expression, when I'm interacting with all these people, it's coming up in the interaction. And it's not because I'm some kind of bigot who hates everybody. It's because this is how society trained me. And it's not because my parents were shitty parents necessarily. It's because that's how society trained them, and that's how our school systems trained us and and the systems all around us unconsciously. But what we can do, is start to do something about it by starting to talk about it and think about it and think about how it should. And you'd be like, oh, you're overthinking. We're not overthinking. What we're trying to do is stop the hurt. Is hands off our immigrant friends. And all, God, we're trying, well, hopefully what I'm trying to do is minimize the harm that I'm actively participating in towards other people. And the only way I can do that is to start to acknowledge the potential harm that I'm actively doing towards other people when I'm in interactions with them. Much of which is mostly unconscious. So we have to bring it up, make it conscious. And we can especially become more conscious about it by speaking with those in the discriminated class or party or population. It is not their job to educate us, certainly not. But if you do have the privilege of getting to have a conversation and they are open to explaining, by listening to what they're saying, you can begin to understand how you or your people or society in general are harming them in ways that you never even knew and understood. For example, if you speak to trans people and understand the importance of pronouns, if you are a cisgendered person, you will not fully understand that until you speak to someone and speak to what it feels like to be misgendered, to be dead named, to be, insert thing here. You will never fully understand what it felt like to go through a therapy that didn't acknowledge a part of me for 4.5 years. You never understood what it felt like to be part of a community that didn't make space for trans people for 30 years, or whatever, 29 years. And you'll say, oh, we're not transphobic. How would you even be aware of your transphobia if you're not speaking to trans people and hearing their experiences? Beyond I gave examples in some of my videos about some really disturbing things people said. It's not just the said, it's the unsaid. It's the people not in the room. It's the voices not heard. It's an active process. It's an active process of facing things that you may or may not be aware of. And finding safe space to explore that and acknowledge that and just get curious about how you're continually engaging in it. And so I'm preaching this, but I'm also saying it to myself. I'm trying to do this in all of my interactions. And just be consciously aware of how I'm participating in these dynamics. I mean, and this is an interesting example of for me, and it's so subtle, but I felt when I was in my first stop, or generally in the mainstream white, generally coming from Christian background culture, I just felt like there's this very lacking of awareness of Jewish people and Jewish cultural norms, and even this very Christian-centric view of the world and Jesus-centric view of the world, and ways of seeing, even if they're now openly atheist or agnostic or pagan or whatever, how those shape their viewpoints and their points of argument, saying things even as subtle as we don't have to God, all this that's not what Jesus meant, and Jesus was really this thing, and as a Jewish person being part of those conversations, going why do we even need Jesus? not like they're talking about this thing that was very relevant to their lives that really had little relevance in my life. We almost never talked about that thing, and they're saying how it's still important. If this is making sense, um, basically what I'm talking about is this idea of misunderstanding and feeling like an outsider, and this Christonormativity, Christonormativity. Yeah, and people call it Judeo-Christian, but it's a Judeo. Like there's space for me, but I, I felt like I always had to explain and give nuance. And even if there was space, the understanding was usually Ashkenormativity. So they just thought I was like this Eastern European stereotypical Jewish person. I had to be like, no, there's a Arab and the thing, and it's a whole different culture. And even those, that's I guess a microaggression of me not, of me feeling like I have to educate people on just what I am. And there's these constant like expectations of who I am. God, like I was even like just talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "No, you were a nice Jewish boy. You didn't." They were like assuming my history, I guess, just. And it was a joke. It was in jest. But it's this like, what is the nice Jewish boy, and how do I, beyond it being misgendering me, what is it? How does it? Unless I was masking as a nice Jew, how does it like erase who I actually was? And in the little assumption, and put me in this funny position where I have to actually like educate on like my cultural experience. I in order for people to even like think about it, it's nuance. You might like, it can feel like there are bigger hills to climb, but I think it's important to understand. No, DI is bad, and we should take it out of schools, and they're making your kids trans. The fuck? What? It's really hard to open my eyes to some of the things I tolerated with a smile and even supported. I really don't want to talk about becoming an ultra-Orthodox person, do I? Oh, fuck. All right. We'll do it. I'll put on the glasses. Do I look like a good Jewish boy now? And so, like, oh my god, my accents, are you gonna say, we're gonna start to say my accents are my internalized versions of that accent? Was that an internalized Jewphobia accent? Or was I just Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Free Palestine. Thank you. Fuck you. I'm gonna tell my story now, right? Are we good? And so I come back home, and I got this gaping hole in my heart. I know, right? Like, very, we're gonna try. So I come back home, and I got this gaping hole in my heart, and I need something to fill it with. And so I had my mindset at finding my pyramids. And I was gonna do that. And I really thought that was going to Israel. And so I I started calling every rabbi I knew that could have some connection. I specifically wanted to go to Or Sameach, so I was pushing to go there, and they had a program that they might be able to get me in on, potentially, but I would need to get some kind of form from the Israeli embassy. Holy shit. And wow, so if you, at this point, while the Syrian community had mostly moved out of COVID, and much of the story really didn't talk about the pandemic was still something that was very real, and for many people, it's still only June of 2021. And a group yet has not even been welcomed, and birthright stopped. They weren't sending groups to Israel, groups of Jewish people to get. Can you imagine? Something finally stopped their religious freaking God. Okay, and so yeah, but I was dead set on doing this, and I really felt it was similar to just like the year prior, or was it 2 years prior, where I just had to push in order to get into my doctorate, and I just need to pray for this miracle, and this miracle was going to come, and I just needed to keep praying and call and do my hishtadlus and call everyone I could. And if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. I think I was planning on going to Muncie. There was a program in Muncie that I was thinking about if it didn't work out. Oh God. And so in the meantime, I was working as an active therapist, and that was wrapping up. So it was going to be kind of perfect timing, with certainly no overlap, where I certainly wasn't telling my supervisor that I was in America while actually being in Israel. That never happened. While covering the windows in order to make believe that the time wasn't changed. That didn't happen. None of this happened. What are you talking about? I never said any of that. That would be crazy. And certainly no other cohort members recommended me do this, because they also did this too. That kind of stuff never happened. That would be problematic. And so, God. Yeah. And so, I don't even know if it's that big of a deal. And so we took tests as a group together. We did what we could to survive. It's interesting to like be a person who wants to be integral and authentic, and to have to survive systems that force that out of you and put you in positions where you have to decide whether or not, or what amount you want to compromise your moral integrity in order to succeed. And so for someone who really values authenticity, it often put me at odds with myself. Okay, thank you. And so I'm praying for this miracle. In the meantime, so I got a thing on I almost had an appointment with the embassy, but then I couldn't find my passport number, and I missed it by a minute. And then I was filling out forms, and the form said I needed to commit to a year in Israel in order to go, which is super interesting, because I talk about what would have happened if I wasn't in a doctor program. Like, I couldn't commit to the year in Israel because I had commitments to a doctor program. I was already signed up to go to an addiction clinic. I had got accepted to go to work in a hospital in Long Island, in an outpatient clinic, and that was using harm reduction modalities. So that was very exciting. Okay. How could I forget this? I skipped a moment. I spoke about, I've spoken about this in other videos, but this is basically around when it happened. At some point in March or April, some point between March and May of that year, just before going to Israel, and before the breakup, I got a phone call from a friend who, to protect their identity, I will just say they were someone I really, really respected in the religious world. I thought of very, very highly. in terms of their connection to God and Judaism. And they called me and said they were having they wanted to understand how I had so much emunah, had so much faith. And so I'm Mr. Emunah. What do you mean? I get miracles every day. I can just speak about my everyday miracles, and this will certainly convince this person that they should have emunah. And so they called me, and I planned on just giving him the pitch about like open your eyes and you'll see it, the same pitch my mentor had given me about hashgacha pratis and how everything's meant to be in the world and the whole shtick. And hashgacha pratis, hashgacha pratit, go look it up. It's basically like divine providence, like this idea that things happen because they're supposed to. Of all the things I've unprogrammed in my brain, I still struggle with not seeing that sometimes. And I'm still like in not like I remember there was someone who left the religious community who burnt themselves at a fire and had their hand bandaged like accidentally, and they said they were smiling. I said, what? They said, it's one of the first times in my life since leaving the Orthodox community that I had an injury and I didn't think of it as God trying to send me a message that I'm doing the wrong thing. And so, right, how to understand the signs. That could be a whole topic. Understanding the signs. I do think that the universe tries to speak to us in different ways. I also think that we need to be very careful and always be conscious of how we may be using these either to self-affirm and reinforce our own beliefs and sometimes even harm ourselves or internalize harmful belief systems. And so, like, because I don't follow Jewish law, I'm a bad person deserving of burns in order to get back. Wow. Oh, man. Talk about internalized Jewphobia. Internalized bad Jewphobia. Wow. Oh, man. Okay, we got one. Internalized bad Jewphobia. I don't want to identify as a bad Jew. Okay, maybe. Anyway, oof. And so hey, it's me, the bad Jew. Don't look at me. I'm a sinner. I haven't worn my tefillin in a year. Oh, don't look at me. Momish. Oh no, I ate pork on Kippur. Oh God. Okay. Khatati. Oh man, Pachati. God. See, some people had, or I don't know, some customs were to like pound the chest like this when admitting your sins. Some were like to put your head down like this on like a table. There's all different kind of ways to self-flagellate. Hatati means I have sinned. Man. Sin. Bad boy. It's so interesting because, like, to talk about my religious experience, because, like, I had this Syrian Jewish experience that religion was certainly a part of, but, like, for me, Syrianism was certainly, and my culture I was raised in, like, Syrianism was higher on the list of importance than was Judaism. And so it's really hard to explain to people. Like, for some of my friends, they were punished as kids for not going to prayer services. That wasn't me. I didn't have that at all. I mean, my dad didn't give a shit. He barely ever went himself. To each his own, Morris. Yeah, to each his own, until I actually tried to become religious. And then it was no longer to each his own. Or, now that I'm doing this, it's no longer to each his own. So it was to each his own, as long as to each was in his viewpoint of what he saw as normal. Whatever. Hypocrisy. But certainly I was not pushed. Oh, that hurts. Certainly I was not pushed to practice religion, and I was not finger wagged if I was not practicing the religion. For most of the religious practice, certainly there were aspects of the religious practice that if I attempted to break, I mean, when I told my mom I had muscles, like she put her hand in her face, shamed, like shellfish, that I intentionally ate that when I was 21 or whatever. You know, when I brought home non-Jewish girls when I was in high school, and I got yelled at, not because they were girls in the house, but because they were non-Jewish girls in the house. And, you know, if I was ever trying to date a non-Jewish person, that would have been extremely controversial from a Jewish perspective. The complicated thing here is that all of those are what's caked into Syrianism. It's the Jewish parts about Syrian Judaism, and so right, and because Syrianism uses Syism, better one. So Syism uses Judaism as one of its tools of control, and what's the word with an M? It's mechanism of it's not just but one of the mechanisms it controls with. And so, ironically though, by developing my own relationship with the religion, I was finding a safe space. So it was this thing that was approved within the Syrian mechanisms, approved within the Syrian authority structures, even approved within the Syrian community. Many Syrians became more religious or were more religious from the start. And then you'll start to hear, we weren't religious when we got to America. This is all internalizing Ashka normativity and it's erasing our Syrian Jewish culture. And you actually might be right to some extent. It's complicated to understand the history of Syrian Judaism and its practices, and were there ultra-Orthodox forms of it in Aleppo, Damascus? I bet you there were, but maybe even not how black hat Syrians look today, how much of even the black hat in itself is, and I can see why it upsets so many people who are Syrian, because it erases Syrian religious culture. Like, would I love if I saw a ultra-Orthodox, love is a complex word, but like if the ultra-Orthodox Syrian Jewish movement chose Arabic garb as their mode of differentiating. I think the whole differentiating process is problematic in and of itself, but like one of the big tells that it is somewhat of a cultural erasure is the acceptance of garb norms of the whiter, more normative Jewish part of the Jewish race. Like, that's not happening. Even Sephardic in general, the idea that Syrian Jewish people have Sephardic practices, maybe I would love to understand history on a deeper level, but could be because of a more white European person. The Spanish Sephardic people showed up in Syria and influenced a more Middle Eastern, darker culture, and were the dominant force there and had their norms accepted, even as immigrants in that culture, had their norms accepted, normalized, and basically the more ancient form of Syrian Jewish practice was rewritten to be more like the Sephardic. And that to this day, my cultural practice of my religion as I knew it growing up was the Sephardic version, not the Mizrahi version, or whatever it is that, I don't know if it's ancient Syrian Judaism was called Mizrahi Judaism, or if that's just, whatever it was, it certainly changed when Sephardic people showed up in the insert year here. Was it post-Inquisition or 1600s, whenever I think actually when you look at it, they call them the Francos, but it's not necessarily people just with my last name, but basically when they showed up. yeah, so understanding my own culture. See, this stuff is fascinating, and this is like my tapestry. This is what I'm made out of. It's like my skin. This is my genes. It's in my bones, and it was taught to me as well. So like in all different ways. So like I am like a walking scroll of history. Like me, my whole being, as are you, of your cultural history. And I'm very lucky because a lot of people worked really hard to preserve a lot of that information and context and can talk about it and do talk about it. And so I think there are really special parts of cultural preservation that are really important. I just think it's really problematic when we use those parts against people. Lahma jeans are delicious. Forcing people to be part of emotionally abusive family structures in order to get lahma jeans is not okay. I'll go pick it up from the local Middle Eastern store if I can find one. There's not enough. I need lahma jeans. Send me. Oh, lahma is the greatest thing in the universe. Kibbeh, sambusak, delicious, machen, tachen. And so, yeah, I love this conversation. I'm finding this fascinating. I don't know if you guys are. I realize I'm all over the place, but I hope we're learning things. I know I am. Maybe we could experiment a little bit with having a script, but again, did you guys prefer that? But the first episode got 2,800 views without a script. Correlation is not causation, Moshe. Oh, yes, it was the first episode, but that also had different factors. It wasn't just because you didn't have a script. Oh, well, thanks, Dr. Moshe. Anyway, I think it's fun, so I'm gonna keep going no script for now. Our episodes are gonna be 7 hours long. Oh God. See, it's also easier to mask like my own crazy when I have script. You don't catch these giggles and laughs and it's me. It's hey, I'm alive. I'm alive. Oh God. Oh, cue the scene from Soul. The guy who's sitting over his desk, the Wall Street person who gets his soul back. Okay. What were we talking about? Yeah, how black hat culture erases. All of this is an incredible, I realize this seems completely tangential, but it's actually an incredible precursor to what the hell's about to happen to me. So in short, up to this moment, I basically had been raised in the Syrian Orthodox Jewish community. I had this traditional family that didn't force me really to follow much of the rules, but we followed many of them, just not all of them. So that slight differentiation made me more relaxed around Jewish law. And even, but school was pretty harsh on it, so that created this little dichotomy. And it's certainly, I mean, this is not in this picture. And this is, I guess, it's funny when you're sitting at when you're a Baal Tshuva, this happens even here in my everyday life. They ask me what's my story? How did I make it out? But when you're a Baal Tshuva, that means a person who wasn't always religious. And I was part of a Baal Tshuva program. Some people might say, you're not a Baal Tshuva. You grew up Orthodox. That's not a real Baal Tshuva. First off, don't define my identity for me. Go fuck yourself. And my journey toward even trying to define what a real Baal Tshuva is offensive. And yeah, we're going to talk about Baal Tshuvas a lot, actually, for the next 2 episodes, because that's what I basically identified as during that time period. And there was a lot of discrimination towards Baal Tshuvas. It was a very real thing. And very real thing. It was one of the things that drove me out of the ultra-Orthodox world, certainly was not there. To the extent that if there was not Baal Tshuva discrimination, I think it's very likely that I would have been married in the ultra-Orthodox world sooner and may have had much more trouble, if ever, getting out. You may be not seeing these videos now. You may be seeing these videos a decade later, with me still struggling to get access to my kids after coming out at trans as 40 with 3 kids. And yeah, oh my, with 7 kids. God, I think I wanted 11. Who, me? Influenced by my religious mentor? What? 11 kids. I think children are wonderful. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand what it means to have children and whether or not it's a positive thing. I still have not bought the mentality that it's a negative thing. I understand people feel like it can be this obligation and can be really constraining, specifically on people with assigned at birth female, and it's a very nuanced conversation, and no one should be forced to do anything. And certainly the world overpopulation is an interesting argument, but is it? Can we not support 8 billion? Is the world really made for 2 billion? And what does that mean? And how do we even parse through all that? And what is my role in all of it? And what about the foster system and like the ability to adopt children? And like, is it unconscionable to like bring people into this world when there's other people desperately needing parents? And also, how many parents are proved to be parents in this world who are not emotionally equipped to be parents? And what does being emotionally equipped even mean? And is it discriminatory to say that someone needs to be emotionally equipped to be a parent? Is that like favoring white, middle class, like mentally competent people who can afford therapy and education? Wow. Right. And so, here's the nuance. There are things that I'll be very quick to admit are abusive, and there are things that need nuanced conversation. And we can have those. And the more we're having them, I think it's really important. I do think people hijack the language of nuance when they say things like, Zionism is nuanced, it's not that problematic. I'll say, people who believe it may not be that problematic because they've been influenced in different ways. But the ideology in and of itself is rooted in highly supremacist and systemically problematic viewpoints, and is literally the focal point of a genocide right now. So I can't. There's parts of it that are nuanced, and there's parts of it that are not. And that does not mean if you believe it, you deserve to be sent to the execution table. But I just think that if you believe it, then you there's a lot to look at. And I would really ask kindly for you to. See, all I can do is ask kindly. For you to deeply examine the potential impacts of your belief systems. And to ask big questions about why it is that so much of the world views Zionism as problematic. And if it truly just is anti-Semitism, or if that's being used to just blanket his viewpoint, and to protect this ideology for a lot of different interested parties. Clearly, Israel is not just about the creating a homeland for the Jewish people, especially those who are supporting it are not that empathetic towards the Jewish cause. Right, there's a whole bunch of evangelicals who are just wanting Jews there so that they could bring the frickin' Messiah and like bring the rapture upon everyone else. That would kill a lot of Jews. Unless they'll tell me that the rapture doesn't kill Jews. I can't imagine that Jewish people do very well in the Christian evangelical rapture. But I would have to speak to an evangelical to find out. But those are, Zionists, those are a huge portion of your supporters. Just being conscious of that, aware of that, maybe even a bit skeptical about that. Who your bedfellows are over there. And so, and it's not a perfect one-to-one. Like the Natari Karta are anti-Zionist, so but I'm very quick to condemn Natari Karta ideology. Just because they're anti-Zionist, I don't think they're good people. So just okay, I'll give you that break. I'll give you that break. So just because there are evangelicals supporting your cause does not mean your cause is inherently problematic. Could just be a coincidence, or But yeah, and the importance in terms of interested financial parties and having an ally in the Middle East and what that means for the U.S. and the U.S. war machine and oil and whatever it is in the Middle East that people are so interested in controlling. And okay, we did the Jewish and Zionist videos already, I know, but like there's longer conversations, right? Okay. So yeah, so my Jewish history. So at Baal Tshuva tables, they would basically ask you like, how did you become religious? Like, and and this is our dynamic. It was religious people who are hosting us for meals would ask us, as people who weren't raised religious, how we got there. And often, what a lot of our stories and the reasons why they loved having us around is we'd actually validate their views of reality. Because we were coming in saying, like, we were chas v'shalom, born in this mainstream goyish world, doing averos. we were, God forbid, born into a secular Gentile world and doing sins, and we were able to recognize our sin and mamish find the Eibishter and literally find our Father in heaven, who's mikaraving from the Arba Campos Aretz. Amecha. Oh man. Oh. So we got to translate. So he's bringing us together from the four corners of the world, his nation, his people. It was stuff I could cry about. That I felt this like Father in heaven was that loving that he was going to collect all of his people and bring them together. And in the funniest way about the mother in heaven, whatever. I do think that the universe has a way of bringing together very special people, and does have potentially like this idea of, I don't know, do I still think the universe kind of loves me and has me on an interesting journey? Yes, sue me. Who, me? Messianic complex? Never. Come on, it's an interesting story. Is it not? Is it not? Okay. Oh, God. I'm helping people. Yeah. Oh, you keep telling yourself that. Oh. And so, I get in arguments with myself all the time. I could act normal. I could. It'd just be much less fun and authentic. Hi, I'm Bob. You know the SpongeBob episode where he rounds out his circles and fills in his holes and pokes in his nose? Hi, I'm regular Bob. I used to keep a sticker of that on my wall to remind me not to conform, but here I go. So, my religious story. We know it, I've told it, but a quick summation. And I think it's important actually to start in the kind of beginning. Not all the way with Adam and Eve, no. My great-grandfather was fairly religious. He was a chazan in synagogues. His name was he's in the Pismonim book, was practicing I think he immigrated from, yeah, I'm pretty sure he immigrated from Aleppo to America in the early 1900s, and was one. And the early Syrian Jewish community wasn't all, certainly was not all practicing, but he was one of the people that were very much practicing the Jewish faith and religion. And his oldest son, my grandfather, was put under a lot of pressure to practice. And so this was actually an area of tension between the two of them, where basically my grandfather was forced to go to, he's this, where his father, and this is very classic between an immigrant parent and the first generation American children. So my grandpa is this American first generation kid, white passing, English speaking, in Brooklyn. And, you know, he's got the Dodgers to go to, and he's trying to survive this public school system, which really isn't made for him either. He's not, you know, and then after public school, getting his ass kicked in that system and having to navigate all these systems that are not exactly made for the first generation Arabic Jewish kid, who has his own difficulties and struggles in life. He ends up having to also, after school, be forced to go to this thing called Talmud Torah, where they literally whip them. From my understanding, they hit them if they couldn't read the scripture the right way. And the classrooms were either very cold or very in the winter and very hot in the summer. And yeah, and they lived potentially, did they have to walk far to go to synagogue? Maybe, I don't know, maybe they lived, that was not till later. But basically, the religion was clearly, and you could clearly understand how it was seen as this major burden on my grandfather, and it was a lot for him. And so he, at 29 years old, go figure, was on a business trip, according to him. This is a story he shared with me, and he was with his cousin, and he was wrapping his Jewish prayer straps, the tefillin, and he had done that every day of his life, other than obviously the holiday. Every day he was obligated to do it, he had done it. And his cousin asked him what was he doing it for, and he didn't have an answer. He didn't know why. And so from that day he stopped wearing them. And that's a very interesting little, whoa, cool thing. He was questioning, or at least in the early stages of like asking himself, what is this all about? Why do I do this? And so of course, though, that created a lot of conflict. And I can't say for sure that it influenced where he ended up choosing to live. Certainly it wasn't, there was no synagogue in the nearby area. It was a long walk, but I did walk. My dad would tell stories of walking, you know, to synagogue with his grandfather. So this is, I'm talking about my great-grandfather, so my dad's grandfather and my dad's father, and their relationship with the religion. And to the end, though, where like I believe my great-grandfather was basically advised, or was strictly following the Jewish law that says that you should not have your kid come to your house for Sabbath dinner, for Friday night dinner, if you know he's going to drive there. Which I don't even think is the law. I think they have outlawed this now to encourage, you know, being more welcoming and being able to get more people to buy into the religion. But at the time, I think he was buying into this, and so he stopped even having my grandfather over, because he knew if my grandfather came on the Sabbath, my grandfather was going to get in the car after. My grandfather also told me some horror stories of him being in business meetings. They were in business together, and they're in business meetings, and my grandpa's literally meeting with clients, and his father shows up in the room, and it's the Sukkot holiday, and he has this giant date palm branch and a lemon-looking thing, the lav etrog, and he's literally shaking it and asking his son if he shook it that day. Now, clearly, these are stories from my grandfather's perspective. Was my great-grandfather that oppressive in his pushing of the practice? I can't tell you. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I do, from what I can say that I did understand, was this was a massive strain on their dynamic, and that my father was raised in a much less religious home. There was still, at the last moments, I believe, at the deathbed, a promise, or around the time, a promise to send from from my grandfather to his father, a promise to still send the grandkids and the kids to yeshiva. And so hence my dad, who started till fourth grade in a more secular school, he ends up going to yeshiva Flatbush from fourth grade onward, as did his siblings, from wherever the ages they were. And so you get this interesting religious upbringing from my dad, who had a father who basically saw religion as oppressive for many parts, but didn't see Syrianism as oppressive for whatever reasons. I guess it wasn't impacting him negatively, so still had all the family structure and still took part in, didn't live in exactly the mainstream Syrian areas, but was still very much part of Syrian culture. And so, yeah. And so certainly, like, my dad didn't grow up with any of the real distaste for the religion that my grandfather had, in the way of that it was not used towards my dad in abusive ways. He was not whipped for not reading Talmud Torah. And so my dad had a more indifferent stance on religious practice, and then you get me, which is still going to Flatbush, and still this, like, we don't even hate it. We even think it's kind of sweet. Like, we go to shul on the high holidays, and it's nice. We'll listen to the rabbi's speech. It's not that offensive to us because, yeah, it's still generally in line with Syrian belief systems and conservative belief systems. And the songs are kind of nice. As opposed to, like, it was very easy to juxtapose this to I had cousins that were forced to go to shul who sat right next to me on the high holidays, and it was torture for them. They would sometimes be able to laugh and make ways to have fun, but this was not fun for them. They did not want to be there. And for me, my dad didn't give a fuck. And even in Friday nights, my cousins would come downstairs and we'd all be playing video games. No problem. But their dad was more religious, and so they had to make believe. I don't even think their dad didn't think they were playing, but they had to make believe when they came, if their dad showed up downstairs for at least half a second, that they weren't playing. As they get older, again, like, this lightened up, but it was very real. It was a very real part of my cousin's dynamic. Their parent, and this was certainly, I heard this with other friends, so this was like, the religion as oppression was alive for other people, not alive for me, at least from my dad. And usually it was the dad in the Syrian model who enforced a lot of the religious practice, who would get you to go to minyan and get you to and push you. Maybe if food, we can argue food was maybe more of the mom's thing, which is a whole interesting can of worms of sexism. But I watched a great video on food and alt-right culture, and I highly recommend. I'm going to link it below. I want to make a whole video on that video. It's super enlightening. And women's roles in the home, and how it's wild. Anyway, my mom was more of spiritual, like, into Tehillim reading, group chats, and sang beautiful songs while we lit Hanukkah candles and made delicious meals for every holiday and Shabbat, and did kind of want me to do it a little more, like, get more into it. Certainly not at any extreme level, just like maybe pray, and thought I don't know, which was why it was so shocking that, because if there was someone in the house who was more into it, it was her. Certainly. My dad, went because this was nice. She actually had belief systems that did align with. She went to classes and right. And so there was this more, like, when I went to Babson, I was planning on not being religious at all. But I brought my tefillin bag so that my mom wouldn't give me shit. Because leaving the tefillin bag behind would have been crossed her line a little bit. So it was really interesting to find where the lines were. Eating shellfish was crossed her line, where my dad didn't care as much. I believe he swore off shellfish post my operation. You want more, you can speak to him personally about his own religious journey towards Judaism and his own perspectives, not for me to give over necessarily, but it is important in how it impacted me and how it impacted my relationship with the religion. And that's why I'm giving it over here. Well, I think it's important to understand and maybe to review how you guys, how your relationships with religion have been shaped from experiences as early as your great-grandfather and your grandfather's argument over religious practice, and how it still is very alive today. And certainly my grandfather, that same grandfather, was quite abusive around, emotionally abusive around my practice of the religion and decision to become more religious. And I'll get into some of those scenes. It was pretty horrific. There was a lot of silent treatment, a lot of really painful choice of words, even just the way of accusing, the way the word you're becoming a rabbi would be used and thrown at me from him. And just this deep non-acknowledgement of like my being. And yeah, it was pretty awful. That experience was not fun. And so it is fascinating that I end up, especially on this like patrilineal line, that I end up choosing, or I'm at least found it fascinating, I end up at least at the time, was choosing religious practice. And in a way, like I did, even though I had never met him, he passed before I was born, felt connected somehow. I felt like being rooted on by my great-grandfather. I would feel like he was singing with me, whether it was on my journeys to Israel or just in my everyday prayer services. I felt like if I couldn't have a living supporter, I had a dead one. Wow, holy shit. That's where I had to dig, I guess, to find some sense of familial support. Oh, I picture maybe my great-grandmother's too, like squeezing my cheeks and calling me Rochi and telling me to keep going. It was helpful. A lot of, actually, when I left the religious practice, like how I interacted with that ancestry in my head was a very interesting process where I certainly don't feel like I communicate with, and we can get into other, just to what extent of delusion this is, but and what extent it's real, but it's as real as it feels, but and relevant in how relevant it is, but yeah, so I don't feel like I'm interacting with them that much, but I certainly did. There was really healing moments of support that whether or not I made those up in my head, it was really interesting to navigate my walk away from the religion after relying on people who are no longer, at least living in their bodies, as sources of support, of spiritual support in my religious journey. Whoa. Holy shit. Fascinating. And so, yeah, so I went to Flatbush, didn't like the oppressiveness of the way they taught the religion. And so by the time I got to college, I thought I would take a 4-year break and then maybe come back and do some of the things. I did have the mentor who was around, who was this model of like religious life that could be, she didn't push it, but she would just have us make a bracha every time. I'd wear the kippah when I was in her house, and she would make me a delicious fruity drink made with fresh squeezed blueberries and stuff, and this cookie from Israel. And I would get my cookie, and I'd get my drink, and the only thing she asked was to make a bracha, and so I'd make my bracha. But I certainly was, before she became my therapist, very inclined to want to, and this happens in any therapeutic dynamic, but want to tell her the things that I thought that she'd want to hear, like that my family was. I would shy away from talking about how non-practicing my family was, and I'd bring up stories of that I was more connected to religion, and I was proud to tell her. And like, I remember the day I did it, like the day I walked into her office in a white shirt and black pants with a Gemara in my hand, and how proud I was too. And God, there was a client I had that I once told I was a Met fan, and he started wearing a Mets shirt to every session. And I mean, some are harm. That was relatively harmless, but it's certainly interesting. But yeah, when we're talking about the influence that person had on my religious journey, it's difficult to parse out. It's really difficult to parse out what was me, what was her. That's enmeshment for you. And, as she represented for me one of the only escapes from the Syrian model. That's interesting. Like, so there was college. I was in college. So why didn't I attach to college as an escape? As like the academic route? Or I was literally in the United States of America. Why didn't I see mainstream culture as that escape? These are good questions. I guess they weren't, I don't know. Were they not viewed in the same way? Was there not the relationship in the same way? She was still Jewish, so that's interesting. Yeah, we certainly, as traditional, quote unquote, as we were, we viewed Reform and conservative Judaism as not real. And I do think that to this day impacts some of my relationship with the more creative forms of Judaism and the less orthodox forms, the non-orthodox forms, yeah. And that in itself could be a form of anti-Semitism. God. Ooh. It's an hour and a half in. Can we start the story? Almost. And so, so Flatbush, Babson, I get to Babson and I'm try and drop all the practice, but I end up missing it and feeling guilty about breaking it with stories like getting a stomach flu from a cheeseburger and breaking my phone if I used it on Shabbat and breaking a brand new phone that I just opened that day. And so I took these as subtle messages from God to become more religious. I've told this story so many times, but it's just important to have context. And it's hard to tell the story because it makes me also want to question everything I'm doing now. How do I know I'm not doing the same thing all over again? How do I know I didn't find a new religion and it's called wokeism, whatever the hell it's called, and that I'm just blindly thinking that the universe is pushing me in some direction, and that I'm making now long-lasting, impactful decisions in my life that I can't take back based on this potentially false view of the world. How do I know that I'm not doing that? Especially when it comes to, decisions to not get married in the Syrian world, have kids in the Syrian world, and not even be connected to family from the Syrian world, and not live there. And here, this is it. This is where the everyday battle and grief comes. Of just how many of those voices are real and how many are just internalized phobias? And how do we tell the difference? You keep going. Maybe this is, I wasn't smiling this much when I I was still smiling a lot. People who came to my dips, it's interesting for me to rewatch some of this shit. The dips, I didn't mention it enough. I basically didn't just dip every day. I also held space every Friday for a meditation where I'd invite people to come, and it was like magic. People would just show up, like all at the right time. Even, I texted in a group chat, but it was really cool how it all would work out. And we'd get there, and I'd give over this like breath work and meditation, and like this connected to the Parshat HaShavua, the weekly Torah portion, and we'd go into the ocean and scream together and sing together, and as the sun set on the water, and we were going into, or the sun was setting, and we were going into the Shabbos, and damn, there's a video that I recently watched of, sometimes I go through the pictures as I tell these stories, and I watched a video of me and Turks and Caicos giving, in the Passover trip, doing a kiddush, and it was a yak nahaz, which I at the time didn't fully understand what that meant, so I was stumbling on it, but I was still like doing it with all this passion, and the wind was blowing, and you see me with my cup reading it aloud, and I'm like really into it, even, and then it's a pan out to the family, to my cousins, and like there's either people laughing, trying to pay attention, or just not at all. Or like with a scowl a bit. And I'm just like, oh Moshe. Oh, yeah. It was very lonely to be on a religious journey in my family. I was June 1st weekend, so my second to last weekend in Deal. But just as everything was falling apart, God, I was still technically in yeshiva. And I was walking to shul, and I was walking from shul to my grandma's house. And that's like a 40-minute to an hour walk. And so somebody asked me when I got to my grandma, like, what do I do during the walk? What I do, what I think about. It's a long walk alone. And I just said I was singing the song. I walk a lonely road, the only road that I has ever known. Fuck. Okay. And I could hear the other side going like, you didn't have to be lonely. You could have just been a part of everything. And this was like this like difficulty of being stuck with what felt right, what I believed in, and what people around me were believing. And this didn't feel exactly like a choice necessarily. I guess there was choice around it, but I was believing that that there was something bigger in the universe, that the Torah, that practicing Judaism was real and important to me, and those around me weren't necessarily believing that. And it's very hard to believe something that those around you do not. Yeah. It's actively a painful process. And really confusing, because they'll say that they believe the thing that you're trying also to believe, and then they'll be offended by you because by you literally just existing, you're saying that they're not believing the thing that you are saying that they believe in. If they're saying they believe there's God. Anyway, so I was heartbroken, called a bunch of rabbis, trying to make my way to Israel. And it turns out that basically the embassy told me that unless I commit to a year, the Israeli embassy said, unless I commit to a year in Israel, which is such a weird thing. I guess they were trying to make a yeshiva exception for guys doing yeshiva. So if I don't commit to a year, I can't go. And I thought that was some bullshit. And I debated whether to just tell them I was committing for the year, and then what, were they going to imprison me there to stay? Like, no, I could have just laughed. But that also felt tricky. I didn't want to lie. I didn't know. A yeshiva was going to have to sign off on that commitment. So I had my doctorate program to come back to. And so there was one last ditch effort. Oh, well, did I just stop in the middle of a story about my friend? So basically, I don't know if I told this part of the story, but my friend, who was a very important, dedicated person to religion, or at least I thought he was, called me and told me he was having a crisis of faith. And said that he no longer believed, he was struggling to believe whether or not the Torah was from Moshe at Sinai. And if it wasn't, if God didn't literally dictate the Torah to Moshe at Sinai, and that instead it was written by like 5 people and put together over time and an amalgamation of different mythologies, then why the hell are we following it? And he was, and so he threw that to me, and he even felt bad. There was a line of yucking my yum. He didn't use that one, but someone else did. Yucking my yum. Was he yucking my yum? Am I yucking a lot of people's yum? I hate that phrase. I don't like it. The phrase is yuck. But just think of like stepping in gum. Anyway, he it makes me start to question the authenticity of the Torah, and I panicked myself. And I was trying to bury that. I brought it up in therapy for sure, and she laughed it off. I was watching a lot of content. I had already watched content that from a Rabbi Kellerman in classes with one of my friends' dad on how the Torah was for sure, that there's no way that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, and that all these logical conclusions on why it had to have happened. If 3 million people witnessed it, there's no way to lie about that. But at the time I really wasn't like, it was more so that confirmed my belief. I wasn't denying it. And so here I was like confronted with the alternative and realizing why videos like that have to exist, because when people become educated enough, they start to realize that, holy shit, I can't buy into this, at least not for reasons that the evidence gets pretty clear the more you begin to understand it, that this was not a religion that was divinely ordained, at least not in the way that says it was. There's many ways to divine, as the rabbi had told my friend. And God, I hate that so much. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions about what is divine, but like, at least be forthcoming to the people about it. The people who are not aware, the people who are blindly following. And I don't want to make it that they're like dumb or something. I just think that they are in systems that don't really make a lot of space for thinking outside of said systems, and that you have to be really privileged to have either, awareness, exposure, experience that can push you out of that. I don't think it's an accident that this conversation was happening between a doctorate student and another, in my part, and another. This person was just a very highly educated and intelligent person. And this was a conversation between 2 male presenting people also. So it's like, I don't think those are outside of that context. Not to say that these conversations couldn't happen for 2 Syrian women who didn't get to go to college, but that they would be less exposed to those ideas. And this is, so the existence of the conversation in and of itself is a privilege, that I even got to have it. But anyway, I'm having this existential crisis. Imagine, and that was all going on towards the end of my relationship, where the religion wasn't the only reason I ended it. Certainly not. There was this internal feeling that it didn't feel right, and speaking that out and speaking my truth. And but religion was certainly a pushing factor, was certainly It was my period. It's where I felt like I was heading next. It was the thing that helped me feel like I was going towards something meaningful, and certainly an area of tension in that dynamic. But yeah, well, and so I can't remember what my therapist answered in the beginning when like this person expressed that, how we like talked it away. Did we? And I was watching a lot of, again, I mentioned this, the Rabbi Foreman Aleph Beta content, which, well, not explicitly, there's only a couple episodes that explicitly, try and combat the documentary hypothesis. They do very much try and say that this book is like all interconnected, and it reaffirms over and over again that the Torah itself is this interconnected book. And while many of the videos are beautiful and educational, I do think it's very dangerous that they're not addressing the big gay question about, unless they do. I haven't watched their content in a while, but I don't think they would, because they're trying to pitch themselves to Orthodox people, and then now we get into capitalist arguments about how to market. What is marketing, and what is companies, and what is our objective as companies. If it's to make capital, then certainly if they started talking about gay rights, they would lose capital and lose people, let alone, I don't even know, he's an Orthodox rabbi, so I don't think he would he himself support gay rights. I can't speak for Rabbi Foreman. I met him once. No, I cannot speak for him. And so, but I certainly, I was enamored by his content, and it helped to reaffirm for me, right off the bat, his content helped me justify my continuation in Judaism, because he was someone who engaged with Torah in it from an intellectual, highly educated perspective, and was basically defending it for better, more or less. His videos were more about concepts and ideas and the good things we could learn from it, but they were very much, each in their own ways, protections of this homophobic system, this transphobic system. And, there'd even be videos about understanding the Torah in the context of the time, and, how the comments on women's slavery and having a slave that is a woman were actually about women's liberation, if you reread it and understand it from certain angles. And I'm not here to... There were certainly some unique and interesting points to be made there about the Torah and its time, and I'm sure we can have a really nuanced discussion if we really sat down with some historians and understood the actual influence of the Torah versus what I was told in religious spaces was the influence of the Torah. But for people that think the Torah really changed the world, it's the best-selling book of all time, and it certainly changed the world. But did it bring morals to the world? Do you ever see those videos that talk about the mystery of the Jews? And oh God, I remember that one. There's this video that talks about all the Jewish Nobel Prize winners and all the Jewish contribution to society, and how this must be evidence of the Jewish people being a miracle. To say it was one thing that makareved me, it's certainly, there was a million things. I was surrounded by Jewish thought and Jewish ideas. And even though my family wasn't fully practicing, I was very primed to be put in a position where I actually had to ask myself the question. And this is really big. Basically, what my friend's challenge pushed me to, I was already going to prayer services. I was already trying to keep kosher. I was already, trying to and try implementing this in the middle of a relationship where you didn't start with this. I was implementing Shomer Negia, which was I wasn't touching anyone of the opposite sex of me that wasn't my relative. Yes, I did implement that mostly in towards the end. Again, was religion the main factor of the end of the relationship? No, but it certainly played a role. And my therapist didn't help. No shit. But she would, anytime I brought her any kind of conflicted feelings around whether or not she was very judgmental, and it's shame confirming. You know, there's gender affirming, there's shame affirming. She was shame affirming. She would be like, yeah, you should feel bad about that. Uh, yeah, that should feel confusing. And God, and like, because this is what happens when you have therapists with a certain worldview. I just made a huge comment on a video where this like freaking genspect, something called genspect, where they're basically where it's like I'm looking at my therapist's like cohort, like she would, you know, agree with 95% of the things this lady was saying on the stage. We took a different angle, but basically it's a video of a lady on stage at a conference, a psychologist, an APA certified psychologist, who is saying that the reason why kids want to transition is because they're afraid to grow up. And by affirming their gender, we're instead of exposing them to the thing they're afraid of, we're affirming it. And we're basically feeding their fears. She compared it to helping a liposuction for someone with anorexia or something like that. Or like, I don't know. There was sick comparisons. And I'm just like, I mean, the idea, she kept talking about this idea that trans people are afraid to grow up, trans children specifically. And I'm just like, Darvo, first off. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. Me never gonna grow up. Never gonna I can see where you're coming from. It's like, no, God. Could you imagine if I said to a person with glasses that the reason why they're seeking glasses is because they're really just afraid of not seeing what's coming? You know, they should learn how to expose themselves to having bad eyesight and learn how to live with it, because that's how God made them. Oh, no, sorry, we can't bring God into it. We have to sound professional. That's how they were created. I just really struggle. I'm trying to wrap my head around how I thought about trans people at the time. I think our ideology again was escape. The ideology that my therapist pushed was that it was an escape method, or that I even bought into, that I was trying to figure out myself. But certainly I unconsciously and or consciously spoken out loud, this grass will be greener is how we thought about it. And that people who become trans were just like not become trans, who are trans. People who transition were like similar to people who commit suicide, as in they're like looking for, or people who use substances, who they're just looking for this alternative, hoping that which is super interesting, because like if this is an alternative that makes them feel better, as would the other two examples would be. The only thing with the other two examples is they actually cause harm, where gender transition, if you compare the harm of the harm of transitioning to the harm of literal suicide or substance abuse, let's which one of these things would you pick? And that's not even, they shouldn't even be in the same conversation, but like, you can, this is what I felt for. This is what I was bought into. And I imagine this is what some other people are bought in. Because like, how else are people justifying keeping themselves in the closet? They might not be thinking about it out loud, right? But like every person who is trans, and there's certainly a lot of trans Syrian people, let's not mistake. I'm one of the only open ones. Are you out there? Hello, are you out there? Hey. Anyway, I'm one of the only open trans people there are tons of trans people in the Syrian community. So what makes them stay closeted? What makes them, and there's a lot. It's do they think it's disgusting? Do they think it's shameful? Do they think it's sinful? Do they not want to hurt their families? Do they think it'll go away? Have they just suppressed it their whole life? Where does it go? Do they play it out in the fantasies in their bedroom and that's where they keep it in a little hole? Do they drink it away at night? Where do they put it? How about all the gay people? Where are you? Where are you, gay people? Are you out there? Hello, hello. Bi? There should be a ton of bi people. Just statistically, hello. Hello, my bi friends. And so are they just, repressing? It's really complicated. And then if they're repressing, why? Like, why? And maybe but there's a lot of reasons why people would repress, not to justify it, but to understand that people would repress because it could mean, so it's like social suicide to come out. Not just for you, but for your whole family. We've talked about this in some of the initial videos, some of the initial content. But it's worth repeating. Why is it worth repeating? Why are any of the, what's the point? I'm free. First off, I'm working through shit every day. Free is an idea. If you want to be free, be free. That's not true for people in prison. But anyway, yeah, well, there's a whole community of people, at least the ones in the place where I came from that are now. There's people around the world that are, and so I would hope that they get to be free too, and I could offer some information that may help push them to reconsider while understanding that I was in a very unique position to do this, and that I don't think that every single person who is trans, quote unquote, should come out immediately, because that could be dangerous for them. That's just the reality. My heart hurts like fuck as I'm saying that. But yeah, if you don't, if you're gonna get disowned, if you're gonna end up homeless and on the street, like, I would recommend to make sure, to check first that you have possible support systems. The trick is, though, that it's really hard to make support systems before you take the leap. Like, for me, I did have some systems of people that were willing to support me emotionally and even financially, to still, that I still was able to float when I initially came out into this moment. Hi. And so that puts me in a position that I get to. So I don't necessarily think that everyone should rush and scream. If they do, I'm here to root them on. I'd be very happy to find another content creator, in this space. This specific space, there's content creators in a bunch of cool spaces, but someone else in the space, if I could find someone doing something similar and we could bounce off of each other, that would be kind of cool. And, I've been a bit in an isolationist mode myself to protect myself. So there's some people that I'm wanting to reach out to that I have even reached out to me. So I'm hoping to respond eventually and maybe start my own process of getting some kind of something together, some sense of a movement. And there are movements already happening. I've linked in my video the Sparta Q network. There are movements happening without me. This, as the story of Esther goes, we can do this with or without you, Moshe. They don't. I'm not needed, thankfully. But maybe I am. I don't know. It's hard enough. I'm doing my own life. Don't yell at me. But I do think I can make an impact. I think I am making an impact. So here I am. Hi. Hello. What can I say? But you're welcome. And so, yeah, so my friend gives me this existential threat. Like, is it real? I don't know. And because I never had to ask myself that question, suddenly things changed. So I was suddenly placed at a binary that I never understood, or a dichotomy that I never understood I was really at. And in a way, I wasn't at. Because once you're aware of the question, you can no longer go back to reality in which the question didn't exist. Now, before you were in that reality, the question was there, but you weren't aware of it. So it wasn't actively causing you to question your everything. I can speak for myself. Once I was aware of that question, it was hard to go back. Because if it wasn't true, right? Like if the Torah wasn't true, and if this guy, if the theories were correct, the documentary hypothesis was accurate, and whether or not it was accurate, if what that if historians, if historical evidence was all pointing towards the thing that this was a combination of mythologies, then what would that mean? Well, it would mean a lot of things. Holy shit. Yeah, it would mean that. It would mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's scary, right? We got to go backwards. Like, wait, then what the hell was Yeshiva Flatbush? Why was I there? What was I doing there? Why are they doing that? Why are they teaching Judaism if it's not true? It's not necessarily saying that they shouldn't be teaching Judaism, but it's starting to ask different questions. Because it's now clear at this point that if it's not true, then they shouldn't be teaching, then they've lost a justification for teaching Judaism. So teaching Judaism can still do different things. It can keep the community in line and keep the kids together and doing bazras. Flatbush as the bazra maker, how many kids met there? Probably a bunch. I know my parents kind of did, but they also kind of met in the center or also at my dad's bar mitzvah. I don't know. There's different ways to meet in the Syrian community. But the what the hell was the school doing? What the hell? Why did we go to that synagogue? Even if we only go once a year, why are we going? Like all those questions start to come up. And you're like, holy shit. Like, wait a minute. Why am I only marrying Jewish people? Wait. Why can't I eat cheeseburgers? Hold on. Why can't I be trans, gay, bi? Because who, what, where? Because they basically, the idea that the Torah is true is like one of these pillars, And not everyone thinks about it on a day-to-day basis, but if it was just completely obvious to all people, like if we just gave a serum to the entire American people that the Bible itself was not true, would they shift their opinions or would they just find something else to fill the pollution? That's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. They certainly didn't talk about this. There wasn't a class in Flatbush. Aish talked about this, trying to combat it and trying to justify that the Torah was true. And my friend's dad, who I went, and showed me the Rabbi Kellerman videos. Rabbi Kellerman was connected to Aish. So the ultra-Orthodox Baal Tshuva places certainly had to defend their positions because they are literally much more based on this. The Syrian Jewish community and other like modern Orthodoxy and certainly traditional Judaism can get away with it a little bit because it's not as reliant. In a way, people don't take the Torah that seriously. But yet they do, because if you push them on it, they will. And this is the difference, where even though my dad would say, God doesn't care if I turn the lights on Shabbat or if I get in my car on Shabbat, push my dad on whether or not I could marry a non-Jew. Push my dad on whether or not the biblical stories, he doesn't even think about it. He never actually asked himself these questions on whether or not the Torah is true. It didn't bother him. Why? I can't speak for him. I don't know why it didn't bother him. But I think we can start to think about how status quo also and privilege play a role here. Like, you wouldn't question things if they didn't suppress you. So for me, it's interesting that, questioning the Torah was a very big deal in my life, because without the Torah, I would have had much more reasons to be openly trans. Now, obviously, there were other things stopping me from being openly trans, but it's hard to God, it's hard to yeah, it's hard to see that was not, it was certainly one of the barriers. Being alive in the Syrian community was a whole nother barrier. So I was going to have to ask myself questions about being there. But I don't think this is just about transness, and it's not just oppressive to people. There are people who do want to seek things called truth and authenticity. I think that's kind of in all humans, but I certainly think there are a bunch of humans who feel more of a call to it. I can't tell you if or why, if truth seeker is a real thing, and what makes one person a truth seeker and not another. Shouldn't all people hypothetically be truth seekers? Are there such a thing as sheeple, as in sheep people? I don't want to start to hierarchy and say that I'm better just because I question things. I think I was privileged, and I had the privilege to question things. Because if I was busy working or sweating it out to make a Syrian family happen, if I fell in love and the person was in love with me and it worked out and I wouldn't have a question at the time to ask any of these questions. What? I got 3 kids to pay for to go to Flatbush. I don't have time. That I got, there are, at this point, I'm in my 8th year of college. Like, that's a lot of time to ask a lot of questions that a lot of people don't get to ask. And there was no obvious, there's existential stuff and internal stuff and emotional stuff, but there's no obvious, like, you better, hurry it up. There was no rush. There was no real rush. It was pressure, but no real thing telling me. So in that space is space to question. You'll say, now we have to, this is it. We just have to make them busier so they won't think about things. No. What the hope would be is that other people get to have space too to ask questions. And or hopefully they could get lucky and stumble upon some content. It shouldn't have to be that they get lucky. We should dismantle the systems that don't give them a second to breathe, and actually create systems that support humanity. No? Maybe a little bit. Anyway, so I was a truth seeker. Why? I can't tell you exactly. I've left, is it biological? Is it nurture? I don't know. It's just, I don't even like it. I feel like it's this thing people told me I was. I don't exactly identify with it. It's like something ChatGPT would tell me. I'm still a fan of the validation from AI. There's obviously risks about it. We can talk about AI therapy another time. AI was super supportive in the beginning of my journey. I will say that. We're getting off the rails. And so, Torah was real. So this was this background question that I wasn't even ready to internalize as my question. I still was calling it my friend's question at this point in my life. But that's where I was. And I was hoping that going to Israel, I could actually ask the question. It wasn't going to be the only thing. I was also just hoping to meet new people, get introduced to next steps in my life, feel like I was finding my pyramids. I was hoping maybe if I was lucky to meet my wife out there, that I would bump into a woman randomly and it would be perfect, and it would finally feel right, and there would be no questions in my body. It would feel like a river flowing, and this was going to happen, and I believed in it. And I just needed to pray hard enough. I'd worked 2 years ago. I got my miracle and got into the doctor program. Now I'm just going to go to Israel. I'm going to go to this place that the therapist is recommending, and it's going to be amazing. And yeah. And Yeah, so on one side, if the religion wasn't true, then I questioned my entire life. But if it was true, and this is an important thing that's going to hit me while I'm out there in Israel, if it was true, then God, shifting something on my channel, doing it right now, screw me. I'm gonna, sue me, screw me. I'm gonna start to call it Palestine. I don't even feel right in my heart calling this land Israel. When I was on the occupied lands of Palestine, wow, yeah, much better. I mean, this place, Or Sameach, where I was at, was literally on the border of a sheik, of some big Palestinian neighborhood, and we were a little worried about. I mean, God, I can hear people saying, "You walk into that neighborhood as an openly trans person." They are literally being genocided. We can talk about gay rights after figuring out genocide, okay? Or while we can talk about gay rights now. Yes, gay rights everywhere are really important. Now let's stop genociding, okay? Thank you. I didn't know that we punish homophobia with genocide. Should I start? Because if we did, the Syrian community would be in a bit of trouble. What kind of argument is that? You try walking down Ocean Parkway, walk into Shara Zion waving a rainbow flag and see what happens. Walk into Ramallah with a rainbow flag. Okay, so you won't hang me. I'm sure you're not going to treat me very well. Maybe. Oh no, what do you mean we're going to feed you rochi? We're going to bring you salajan. Bring me salajan. Do it. Let's see it happen. Oh, salajan are these cream-filled fila dough pastries. They are epic. Salajan. That means little fingers. Most we call it salaj, but Jean it's mini. I don't know. Anyway, am I hungry? I am hungry. I'm on a commune whose food diet is pretty. You know, it's okay. There's not so much meat. There's not that many snacks. Okay, yeah, I can go get some snacks. Maybe I'm a little lazy. Oh, God. Are you still watching? You were the weird one now, not me. Oh, God. Okay. I'm imagining like some like hired professional that just like my parents going like, all right. They're like just feeding, like they pay some dude to like watch my YouTube content and like diagnose me and then like send me like please Morris, take your meds. No, my name is Marcel and the only meds I'm taking are PrEP and HRT, so go fuck yourself. Oh, God. The clarification, I was never diagnosed. I was never formally diagnosed with any kind of psychiatric illness. Beyond my one meeting with that psychologist who thought I was an alcoholic when I was 17. But I don't even, that's not a formal diagnosis. It was 15 minutes. So no, at least not formally diagnosed with anything. When I diagnose myself, I think diagnosis is a tool. It's all too often used to hurt people and control people and to shame people. So I'm not going to entertain that conversation right now. But I do have some theories. Okay, so none of which are relevant right now, I don't think. Who, me? Manic? Depressant? Never. No. Narcissistic? Borderline? Yeah. What about human? Can't I just be a human? Can I, why do I need a diagnosis? I'm just a person. Fuck you. You need a reason. You need a reason to explain why I'm making my choices. It must be because I'm sick. Because if I wasn't sick, I'd be buying into your community. Right. Right. I'm the sick one. Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. You think I'm the sick one because you don't want to acknowledge that you're probably either neglecting or actually being horrific yourself. You're believing in problematic and harmful behaviors, and you're passing those on to all your lineage and children. Thank you. Obviously, I'm by you. I still think majority of my audience is from the Syrian community. I could actually be wrong. I have no way to know, but I'm assuming. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm like, I find out I have this like very varied like audience. You know, I there are people throughout my travels who are buying, who you know, are watching as well. So if you're out there, big hugs, high five, love you. Oh, hey friends, I'm doing well. I think they can tell when I'm like targeting the space I came from, and when I'm, you you get off of my lawn. All right, I'm having too much fun. So this was supposed to be a video about Ellie. I'm in like my 7th video. I'm supposed to be whatever. So maybe one day I'll make like concise versions of these. This will be the long, fun version though. Who doesn't like the long, fun version? Like you could listen to this while you're doing stuff. I don't know when you listen to this. And so if the religion was true, then why weren't we practicing it fully? If it wasn't true, why the hell were we practicing it at all? You see? So if it was true, then what justification do I have to not keep Shabbos? And you'll say, oh, what do you mean? It didn't mean God meant rest. It means you could rest. Well, hold on. Who says that? Who says God meant rest? If God literally wrote this book, I would want to make sure I know the definition of rest. And if there are people who know the definition of rest better than I do, then I better listen to them. Why do they know it better than me? Because they've actually dedicated their entire lives to studying this book and to have extensive written legal documents trying to figure out what the book meant. It's very polarizing. I know. I realize that there are obviously Reform Judaism and Conservative Judaism and even Modern Orthodoxy have their arguments for why they live the way they do and why they practice the way they do. And there's arguments to be made about balance and arguments to be made about, I don't know what they say. They'll say like, some of it's good, not all of it, but like, I would question the whole premise. Like if we're only if it's not true and we're treating it like a tool, then I think we have better tools. There's better things that could bring communities together. There's better things that, and if it's true, then and you'll say like, there's different ways God wants us to follow it. I would ask, like, which parts of it are then true? Because how do we know we're not contradicting ourselves? Who are we following? Who gets to say what it meant? And that's an interesting, understanding of of patriarchy and like why these old, white Jewish men had got to decide how I'm gonna practice Judaism. It's unique and interesting. Obviously, like people are allowed to have whatever kind of relationship they want with the religion and the practice, and however that feels genuine and connecting for them. I still do my Friday night cup. I still do my mikvah on Friday afternoons. Sue me. It's nice. I think they're nice things. I don't know. They weren't harmful for me. They bring me joy. I like wine and I like water. What's the problem? I'm sure someone could come and tell me about it, I am not a proponent. I realize how mikvah hurts many women. That's very clear. Mikvah hurts people. It does. It's actually harmful. It's really problematic. And it's invasive on women's bodies. And it's trying to say what is pure and what is not. And it's what's the word? Vilifying, like demonifying, like making gross and evil a woman's natural cycles. So, yeah, I'm not. Even the mikvah for men could be like some kind of purity ritual, and I hear all that. I agree with that. I like water and I like dipping. It's cool to think it's like interconnected with some kind of giant spiritual being when I'm in there. It's fun.